And
So
I think
yeah.
it lands in who you're aspiring to be, and you may not be there in
Mhm.
totality, but you're
Yeah,
aspiring to be. It's not a
absolutely.
matter of just, well, I'm going to be this, and I'm going to trick you. It's like it's
No,
more
no,
like you're actually.
Talk to her, Joel.
no.
You feel as the marriage progressed that there's a tension where one person felt like you're pulling more weight than the other.
Yes, 100%.
You want to talk about it?
No.
Maybe some other time, Joel. No, I'm
Yeah.
just joking. Um, I think we've talked a little bit about this, just in terms of what I didn't see happening beneath the surface or behind the scenes, but based on what I thought and believed at the time and what I felt at the time, I felt the heaviest, strongest burden to just be in fasting and prayer all the time. And it was tough. It was tough for me because I hadn't felt such a weight or heaviness before that in my life, along with all the other pressures of learning someone new, of transitioning into marriage, of dealing with, all of the expectations that I didn't even know I had. I also felt the need and the requirement to level up spiritually, to pray more earnestly, fast more earnestly. And I felt like I was contending against a lot more than I bargained for.
And you were feeling that weight for the marriage, or just
Yeah,
in that season of your life?
specific.
Sam, did you have anything on that?
Yeah, definitely saw and see that. For some context, we lived together once married for about a year and a month before we got separated. That year and a month was very tumultuous, very difficult for both of us, very challenging. So many things were not what we expected. It was really difficult, really hard for both of us, just merging two lives into one, our own expectations, our own needs, our own stubbornness, our own weaknesses. I think that can be challenging for anybody who's moving together, living together for the first time. To add to that, I was, as I've mentioned previously, struggling with addiction. I was in active addiction and living significant double life. So I was coming home at all hours of the day and night. There was all types of deception that I was harboring. I wasn't operating in integrity in a lot of different ways. So you have two layers. You have the basic layer that two people becoming one is just hard. And then you have the layer that I was adding all this difficulty. I definitely was aware that Genevieve was doing what she could to make our marriage work and to figure out what was going on, because she didn't know the depths of what was happening at that time. I think what Genevieve didn't realize, and is now realizing as we've talked about it a little bit more, is that I was also, even though that I was struggling in the way that I was struggling, I was also putting in some spiritual work as well.
It is interesting because a lot of times, even people talk about equally yoked or unequally yoked. It's basically, do you have your Christian badge? It's like
Membership.
And okay, then we're equally yoked, as opposed to understanding the whole idea of equally yoked is, and before we had tractors, they used to have two ox, and then they'd have a yoke, which would hold them together, and they would pull the weight of the plow together. And if they were equally yoked, it was on both of them, but there was equal strength. Therefore, you could actually pull in a straight direction and be highly productive. But if one was substantially weakened by something, or substantially stronger or bigger, then it would throw off the whole thing, and you couldn't really rely on them, which even comes back to that whole idea of marriage not just being about love, but being about a purpose bigger than yourselves, a team that God brings together to get something done and to accomplish something that makes the world around us a better place and leaves an impact on your generation. So you get into it, and it's like, okay, spirituality, but our spirituality comes down to, are we walking in freedom?
Exactly.
And if we're not, or if that's not brought to the table up front, then you say, okay, I wasn't ready for that. Because essentially you thought you were building on a similar foundation, but it's entirely different. And you only realize that after the fact.
And even as you say that, looking back, I can identify, and I can feel it now. Like, even I can feel it in my body. Like I reminisce, and I'm like, oh yeah, I felt that. But I didn't know what was going on. So now I look back and I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense. It makes sense that there was a requirement for me to sort of step up spiritually. But at the time, I didn't have that clarity, right? There was a blind spot that I was responding to spiritually that I didn't understand naturally.
And what was the blind spot?
So it was just about his addiction and, all the things that were happening that I just
weren't aware of at the time.
I wasn't aware of. Yeah. But of course, it bleeds into how we do relationship.
Was there some things you resolved and then other things you didn't, or was it just basically a sinking ship from the jump?
I think the ship sunk.
But it was, I mean,
No.
I guess it wasn't that long of a test period. So
No.
it's not like we had things we resolved, things came to light, things became more apparent, and then it was a steady decline. You're kind of fighting to see it not be, but it ended up.
No, I think it was a hard stop. I was completely blindsided. I had no context for understanding or managing, dealing with, living with addiction or anything like that. I had no concept of that. It wasn't part of my lived experience. So my expectations for the marriage, especially spiritually, went completely unmet. I just carried disappointment along with me throughout the days. It got to a point where it was unbearable. And I was like, okay, we're going to have to sit down and have a conversation because I don't know what's going on. And my life feels like it's blown up. Somebody needs to say something to me.
And how much was there a moment of awareness where all of a sudden everything came to light? It was kind of like smoke and mirrors for a while, but then everything came to light, and that was the breaking point.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. What brought that about?
So, I had stayed out all night. I wasn't responding to my phone. Genevieve was wondering what was happening, and was trying to reach out to me. She checked our accounts, and a bunch of money had gone, had left our accounts.
Oh,
And-
no, I know that.
That's how I remember it. No? You remember it different?
Yeah.
Okay. So I came home the next morning, and Genevieve was up waiting for me. And she was like, "What's going on, Samuel? Tell me what's going on. Something's happening." And I think I was silent for what felt like an hour. Like I didn't say a word. And I was just wrestling because it was also very difficult and very painful. Not taking away from the pain that Genevieve experienced, but it was difficult and painful for me to have been going through what I was going through and living the way that I was living, especially because we were on the same spiritual trajectory. So I thought coming into the marriage, right?
Mm.
So yeah, I just sat there in silence and then eventually confessed everything. So yeah, that was the big turning point as far as clarity. Yeah.
So you'd said you'd been doing spiritual work that made you feel like you were carrying the relationship spiritually. Is the audience aware of what the addiction was? Are you open to sharing that?
I haven't shared. No, at some point I plan to.
Okay.
But I'm
Waiting
trying
on
to be. Pardon me.
We're waiting on that. Waiting on.
Yeah,
that?
yeah. I want to be
Okay.
sensitive to like what and when. Like, yeah, it's already been extremely vulnerable to share as much as has been shared so far, and I want to make sure that what I share and when I share is in the healthiest way possible for whoever's listening and for myself, right?
And again, I'm just not aware of what the audience
Yeah.
knows. and
No,
doesn't
that's
know,
fine.
so-
It's a fair question.
So what was the work that you were doing at that time and that made you feel that you were carrying the relationship spiritually?
So if I understand your question correctly, given everything you just told me, how can you possibly think that you are
Well, no, but
you were the one
you-
carrying
but
that you, Samuel, are the one?
I could be sounded that way, but I'm
Yeah.
more you said you were doing work. Did these issues exist in full force before the marriage?
So there's a few questions there that I'll try to parse through, and then let me know if I missed something.
Let's start with that one.
Okay.
I think that's a good spot to start.
No, things were not as bad. The addictive behaviors that I was struggling with had been, some of them I'd struggled with somewhat before the marriage and hadn't struggled with for a long time, or what felt like a long time. Looking back with the benefit of hindsight, there were some things that were lingering that I thought were a small deal that were actually a big
Kind of
deal.
like what you would consider red flags now for yourself.
You're right. Now, red flags. Back then, I thought, not a big deal.
And I think that's an important context. You're going in, you're thinking, okay, no, I got this. This is going to be something that will help me stay focused, and a marriage is going to actually help me, rather than realizing the marriage is actually going to put more pressure and maybe cause me to, if these things offer an escapism in any way, shape, or form
Right.
from difficulty, it's actually going to put more pressure on some of these things. So you can go in with full intention thinking, okay, I'm clean, I'm good to move forward, and then get into it and realize, oh, I'm really not.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Interesting.
Mhm.
So you had mentioned that there were certain things you were doing spiritually that you don't feel Genevieve was fully aware of or acknowledged. What were those things you were doing spiritually that made you feel like you could raise the shoe and say you were carrying the relationship spiritually?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think Genevieve's point and your point is really good. If we're meant to be equally yoked and both taking on our portion of the burden, and one was weakened, I think it's very valid to say that I was weakened. So the portion of the burden that I should have been carrying, I was carrying less in that sense. The reason that I raised my shoe is because, circling back to the questions you asked about not just gender roles, but responsibilities, I really feel like I was the one who was proactively taking the leadership and saying, this is where I think we should be going spiritually, and trying to navigate that in word and in deed. Like everything from, so one of our first significant disagreements was where to go to church, right? Because we both went to two separate churches, and they were very different in focus. My church focus was a lot more on biblical teaching and doctrine. And her church's focus, from my perspective, was a lot more on community. There was a lot more people doing things together, a sense of community. I think her take was different, but we both liked our own churches better. My perspective was that community is good, is helpful, but we need to make sure that we're aligned and we have a strong foundation of solid doctrine, teaching, information, knowledge that's going to equip us to go through whatever hard times are coming. I think that's pivotal to the beginning of the relationship and the marriage. It's not that Genevieve disagreed with that in principle, but that was one example of like the way that I thought throughout the marriage, what is going to be the best course of action for us to grow spiritually, to get where we want spiritually. That included everything from conferences that I invited us to go to together. We joined an organization, a ministry that lived missionally and moved into neighborhoods to help bring people closer to God. That was an initiative that I had been part of before that I invited and brought Genevieve on to.
You want to shout that one out?
Yeah, shout out Moving. Yeah.
Nigel Barham.
Yeah.
And Jesse.
Yeah. I think I was continually cognizant of the fact that we needed to be growing spiritually together. And it was painful for me when I was struggling with addiction, leading this double life, because I was still praying. I was still saying, God, help me be a better leader. Help me be a better husband. Spiritually speaking, help me be the man that I believe our family needs, right? So that was a continual cry and prayer as well, amidst times of not caring and giving in to living the way that I was living. That's the reason that I raised my issue. I think because when I look at our overarching roles in the marriage, I do see that the decisions we made spiritually, I was the one who was more proactive about saying, this is where I think we should go, and then kind of making a plan to execute that.
It's like there's a leadership element in that, in terms of, I think this is where we're going to be safe, even though I'm struggling in this area right now. I really feel like this is a place that's going to help us flourish as a couple, which is definitely still a leadership couple. Genevieve, do you have thoughts in just a direct response to what he was saying?
Yeah, I think like any other challenge or struggle that we face, I mean, we're humans, right? We're going to have dualities and dichotomous experiences of life. We're not all of any one thing. What I credit Samuel with is his ability to present well. I think he does the things, and this is just my honest assessment, he does the things, especially externally, that look good, which we all do, right? We all want people to perceive us as wonderful, and we put our best foot forward and so on. I think that approach to his own life, as well as to the marriage, came through in the decisions that he made, or the suggestions and recommendations that he made when it came to connecting with different groups or living missionally or what have you. And those are great, but I don't think they fundamentally help to carry our relationship. When I think of on the ground, grassroots, like what's happening in the morning when we wake up, what's happening in the middle of the day, what's happening in the night. Like when I think of the day-to-day 24/7 ability to carry our relationship spiritually, like that, I mean, those things are wonderful and great, but they didn't contribute to that. Like,
see, I disagree. I think that, for example, the idea of what we're doing at church, the way that I look at that is that feeds into our day-to-day living and behavior. The community we're part of,
right,
people act in ways that are reflective of their community.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so,
yeah,
do we want to call some things out? Because
let's
that's why I was like, so how are you telling me I need to come to a church where you are allowing all this kind of stuff going on? And what I was like, no, that's not a thing. Wasn't gonna do it. I won't be specific.
I will stand by that church, and I will,
and you can stand by the church all you want.
Stand by. So we ended up going to her church.
All I'm saying,
right? We ended up.
Go ahead.
Which, to be honest, in retrospect, if I was to do it over, I would have quote unquote put my foot down and said, we're going to go to my church, just because I think, again, knowing her church, knowing the leadership, I love them. I had an amazing experience there in a lot of ways, but the depth of doctrinal teaching was very different, right?
And then we could have skipped the whole marriage and just fast forwarded to
maybe, right? We would have just been podcasters and not spouses.
Right? Goodness.
But so I disagree. I don't think that the way that like for you, maybe it seemed performative, and there's a degree of truth to that. A
Oh,
lot
I'm
of
not. I'm not
No,
saying it's
you're
not
not?
genuine,
Okay.
but it is performative. Like
Okay.
there is a way that you value that sort of external.
Yes, agreed.
What is it? Aesthetic?
Yes.
Yeah.
agreed.
Well, and
So
I think
yeah.
it lands in who you're aspiring to be, and you may not be there in
Mhm.
totality, but you're
Yeah.
aspiring to be. It's
Absolutely.
not a matter of just, well, I'm going to be this, and I'm going to trick you. It's like it's
No,
more
no.
like you're actually
Talk to her, Joel.
No,
You're-
so I no, I
like
wasn't saying it was
okay.
disingenuous, like you were
Yeah.
faking it or whatever.
Okay.
But I do think there's a value there that comes out in how you say things and how you do things,
Yeah, agreed.
right? And I see it and recognize it. I don't have that same value.
Agreed.
That's why.
Yeah.
It.
I've worked in marketing for a lot of my career. Internally, I think in marketing, and to Genevieve's point, consciously or subconsciously, some things I shaved off when I was presenting myself to her, and when I have presented myself to others.
yes.
Some things I skew in my favor, and as Genevieve mentioned, we all do that to some degree. I think have historically done that more than maybe many people, and it's been something that I've had to be intentional about,
Mhm.
about not doing, about being more vulnerable, being
Looking back, what advice would you each given to you as a couple prior to getting married that you think may have changed the result?
As far as spiritually,
Yeah.
specifically.
Yeah, spiritually. If this would change, or if this was different, or if this had been addressed, then we would have stood a chance.
That's such a good question.
Great question. I don't know that spiritually, like I said, the biggest thing that I would have done differently was insisted. And even if that meant us not getting married, that meant us not getting married. I would have put us into more situations where spiritually we could be stretched and grow more, which again, I tried to do. And to Genevieve's point, the actual net result of that in the time that we had was not good spiritual fruit completely. Now, would that have changed over the course of 10 years of sowing seeds of good spiritual information, good spiritual atmospheres? I believe probably, maybe, hopefully, yes. Who's to say? But I don't know that there would have been so much I would have done differently, especially given that I didn't understand the degree to which I was struggling. I guess where I would have changed things is I would have made my struggles into a bigger deal, taken more action. I'm not sure that that's just a spiritual situation, although maybe it is.
Well, and I changed the question a little bit more to giving counsel to that couple. So not what you would have changed, but if you had the opportunity to go back as two individuals
Mhm.
and give counsel to that couple.
Okay.
Have you checked this?
Mhm.
So this is like
Watch
a
out
movie
this. Yes.
where like we
Yeah.
can go back and
That's
see
it.
our previous
Yeah.
It's a Wonderful Life things. Okay.
And the ripple effects that go out and change the whole world and maybe cause catastrophe, but we're going to take that chance.
I would tell my younger self, take nothing for granted. Turn over every stone. Look behind every tree, bush. Just don't take anything for granted. Don't think, oh, we'll figure it out. Or, oh, we'll get to that. Or, oh, it's nothing. Or what have you. But trust God. If this is a thing, we're coming together, we can handle or work through whatever comes up, whatever surfaces, right? But don't like suppress things or pretend, deny, just like man up. Face what's being presented to you. Take the cues and the clues and follow them, right? So just don't.
So really, really calling them as a couple to brutal transparency.
Yes, 100%. One radical vulnerability, brutal transparency, 100%.
What about yourself?
I think that if we're talking specifically spiritually, many of the problems that we experience as humans are related to our perception of God and making God too small. If God is a big deal, then the way that we act, the things that we decide, the way we behave is very different. To use a practical analogy, if we have children and the children are a big deal to us, the way we act is different. The way we spend our money is different. The way we spend our time is different. The times we go to sleep, the times we wake up, they're all different. They're all reflective of the fact that we have somebody in our life that's a big deal and that we have a duty of care to them. So if God is an even bigger deal than a child that we love, which is what God should be from my perspective, again, as a passionate Christian, then it informs every decision that we make. And some things you just don't do because of this person who's a very big deal in your life. I would have told my younger self and our younger selves to cultivate that to a greater degree. Do whatever it takes to do that.
And one thing that's been huge for me, the communities that we surround ourselves with, i.e. being in spaces with mentors where that there is that transparency, creates that safeguard where you have the objective person outside of you saying, hey, have you considered this? It's almost like creating those spaces or looking for those relationships. And I know that doesn't always exist, which really sucks because a lot of times people feel very alone and they don't feel like they can share with anyone. We want to get into a position where moving forward in life, taking on greater responsibility, but those things are leaving ticking time bombs within us. That just reinforces the importance of communities in which we're being transparent. We have people who know us inside and out, who can call us on our stuff. You know what I mean? It's almost like you got the blind spot checker in your life. It doesn't mean you're not going to face storms. It doesn't mean things don't fall apart sometimes still. But it definitely gives couples the best opportunity, the best chance of succeeding.
Marriage, I think, is a community event. Like, I don't think it's meant to be in it. It's not supposed to happen in a silo. You invite people to your wedding to celebrate the union of two individuals, right? And that's in some ways indirectly giving everybody their responsibility to help you sustain that thing.
It's often said, I don't know how often it's practically walked out after the fact, but it's often said, hey, everyone here is a witness, and it's like to hold everyone accountable. And obviously life's busy and it's like we have our ideals in our minds, but it's something to fight for sure. So ending off, we're going to go back to the initial question, and we want you to raise the shoe again and say, who carried the relationship spiritually? And then I'm going to have you explain in one sentence why you think that is. So Genevieve and Samuel, who carried the relationship spiritually?
I know to raise yours. That's great.
What happened? You didn't raise
you
raised yours? No. Obviously I raised hers. So obviously I agree at this point. As much as I did provide leadership and vision and did put an effort, the fact that I was too weak to tend to my side of the garden, to pull my side of the yoke, did us more damage spiritually than whatever efforts I made to bring us ahead spiritually.
And Genevieve?
At that point in my life, my marriage was the most important thing. And so it became the most important thing. Pray. That's why I maintained the vote. But that is not to discredit at all or to minimize any and all of what you put, what you did for the marriage at the time. But I think it's about consistency. I think it's about lordship. I think it's about the day-to-day nitty-gritty. Not the highs, the highlight reel, but the day-to-day. Are you being consistent day-to-day in cultivating your spiritual habits and in recognizing that there's something beyond you that you're working towards and living for? And that's why, for me. I love it. That's why.
So you win this round.
I win? Okay. Woo, 1-0. No, 1.5. No, 1-0. 1-0.
1-0.
Well, thank you, Samuel and Genevieve, for having me.
Thank you, Joel. Is there anything that you're doing that you want our viewers to look out for, or any way we can support you?
I have some stuff that's going to be coming down the pike, but nothing I'm going to release yet.
Gotcha.
But I appreciate you having me. And I mean, if people want to check me out on IG, it's just Joel Witton, one word, Witton. So.
Awesome. Okay. Thanks so much, Joel. And thank you all for joining us today. Make sure if you haven't that you like, follow, share, subscribe. We love to have you, and we'll see you again soon.
See you next time.